Mastering cross-functional collaboration. If you've ever thought to yourself, we want to get more done on our team or more done in our organization, but it's so difficult because how do we get people working together? Then this video is for you. We're going to provide some proven strategies for how to approach cross-functional collaboration, and we'll even talk a little bit about what cross-functional teams are so you can have more of a context on how it all fits together.
So when we talk about cross-functional teams, we're talking about teams that are oftentimes comprised of folks who work in different areas of the organization. Whether you got folks from marketing and folks from development, you've got designers, you've got people who are oftentimes in their own sections of the organization, have a variety of skill sets that they're bringing to bear, but you've got projects that ultimately need all of their skill sets, and so we need multiple functions or multiple skill sets coming to bear to make this a successful project. So cross-functionally, you're bringing those together, all the different skill sets, actions, functions to make something happen. And things do happen in really impactful ways when you can leverage cross-functional teams to work together. Better innovation happens, better efficiency happens when it comes to project work, because you don't have somebody working in one silo of the organization, then another silo of the organization trying to keep pace or keep communication with each other. You've ultimately set them up to work alongside each other, leveraging their strengths instead of having them siloed across the organization.
You really are leaning into the power of all of the capabilities and ideas that everyone has. Ultimately, you can do some of this work in more of a siloed manner, but you're ultimately passing ideas forward, and then someone else might add on to it, and then it gets passed forward and gets passed forward. But rarely is this feedback mechanism happening. And feedback is so critical to make sure that we arrive at the optimal outcomes. And so when you have a cross-functional team, that they're feeding off of each other's ideas. They're yes-anding each other. They're bringing in some extra context that might be needed. And so they don't get too far down a pathway that might not work, or they might not get stuck on the first idea that works. There might be a new idea that comes along, and the group then gravitates toward that. And so that's really the key why we want to support bringing people together in this way.
An essential foundation for cross-functional work is ultimately to have a collaborative culture. You've set things up in a way that people are excited to work together and can navigate things when they don't go as planned or conflict arises. Key parts of a collaborative culture are psychological safety, really making sure that people are comfortable sharing ideas early, sharing things that may be unformed, and aren't fearful of retribution or judgment. Really key there. It's also essential for a collaborative culture to make sure that you've modeled what that looks like. You're using practices both in terms of communication channels, your tool stack, and even the methods you use that really embrace the value of collaboration. So making sure that you do things where you ask folks to talk with each other about an idea, talk with the group about what's being elevated, working on things together with each other. Also too, really making sure that you're embracing conflict and supporting folks in bringing up different ideas and navigating that conflict when it comes up instead of shying away from it. Because ultimately, if you've got that collaborative space, that collaborative culture, then conflict is something that is just an essential part of that, and you're excited to navigate it when it comes up, because that's where innovation happens.
It's important to remember that culture is not something that can be manufactured. We have to be intentional about how we nurture it, how we encourage it to grow. What kind of seeds are we planting? We had to do that by making sure we give opportunities for practice, thinking about feedback mechanisms so that people can learn and identify and then combine their ideas and integrate them so that emergent things can happen. And it's through these practices and through these things that we celebrate and honor, such as great wins as well as failures and lessons that we're learning, that help us build this culture over time. And so it's important to step back and take inventory of the behaviors that we want to encourage and the things that are going to help us collaborate more, whether that's sharing things more often, creating prototypes, or even how we think about visualizing our ideas early on, and then making sure that we have a lot of care and understanding for each other, these things will help build a culture over time. But if we don't take that time to step back and take that inventory of what we want to embellish and encourage, then the culture won't evolve in the ways that we hope.
Communication is so key when it comes to your cross-functional work. One key quality of effective communication is clarity. Are we being clear with folks on what we need from them in service of the larger purpose we've identified for the work together? So really key for you to be clear on what your purpose is in your work, the purpose of the project, and that your asks and your communication with folks are clearly anchored in how that serves that purpose. Here's what I need from you in service of where we're hoping to go, and making that really, really clear with folks. I think it's also important to make sure that when it comes to communication, you have an agreed upon approach that you're going to use throughout your communication channels. So if you're going to use certain tool stacks or tools like Slack, what kind of communication goes there? What kind of communication goes in email, and what's the difference there? Do you have a clear sense of who's owning which task and what communication is going to happen around that, so you can be really clear, focused, and in service of the larger purpose that you're collectively gathering and moving together cross-functionally?
Building these team agreements is really critical, because oftentimes when we're talking about cross-functional collaboration, the collaboration team typically comes from different parts of the organization. And they have different rituals and habits and agreements that may be not so explicit, right? Maybe they're implicit. Just over the years, they've started to build up habits, but no one ever documented them. And now we're trying to bring together these folks from different parts of the organization to collaborate cross-functionally, and different expectations about how we use Slack. Do we even use it at all? Do we use Miro? Do we use FigJam? Whatever it is, like, we need to sit down and talk about those things. And a lot of folks feel like it's a waste of time, because it's like, we got to get to the important work. But I can tell you, if you don't do that stuff up front, it's going to cause issues later down the road. A great example of this is NASA versus Europe in the space race back in the 60s. Europe kept blowing up apparatus on the launch pad because there were various countries that were working on different components and pieces. So they weren't communicating very well because they were totally different countries. And when they were trying to integrate it, things would blow up. In the US, we spent a lot of time in NASA thinking about communication protocols and planning all that out before they ever started building rockets or assembling stuff on the launch pad. So if you take that story to heart and think about your communication protocols and your agreements as a functioning team and how you're going to accomplish those things, you'll be much better off in the long run.
Success in cross-functional teams hinges on your ability to leverage the diverse skill sets, the diverse identities, the diverse voices of those teams in solving whatever project challenge you are solving. So first step here in making sure this happens is that you've done the work you need to start nurturing the culture that values diverse voices and diverse perspectives, and then also too that you're building a collective awareness on the team as to what each person is offering and from what vantage point, because then not only are you as a facilitator or leader of that team tapping into those things or identifying those things, that's an awareness of the team so that they know, hey, I could go to this person, or let's tap this person's expertise for this specific thing, and celebrating as a team what comes up as you are leveraging those multiple and diverse skill sets.
A great example of the power of diverse skill sets and perspectives is an innovation story I love to tell. This company was wanting to find a way to create a more low-calorie, low-fat potato chip. They had people from all over. They had food scientists, chemists, engineers, and everything they came up with continued to be kind of variations and riffs on the same theme. They decided to broaden the scope and create a bit of a challenge where they invited more people in. So basically more perspectives, more functional groups were invited in to participate. And this novel idea came from a violin player, and a violin player is very familiar with resonance and how strings vibrate and the sound of the violin and how the violin even vibrates on their chin. They thought, what if we could vibrate the chip at a frequency that wouldn't destroy the chip, but that the oil would leap off the chip? And the engineers were instantly in this eureka moment, like, we think we could do that. And after many prototypes and experimentation, they developed a technique where they could vibrate the chip at the right frequency where the delicate chip wouldn't explode, but the oil would basically leap off of the chip. They wouldn't have come up with that without having someone totally different perspective in the room, in the project, thinking about how they might approach it.
Common challenges that can come up with cross-functional teams oftentimes stem from misalignments around purpose, also misalignments around the processes and practices that maybe people who are coming into a cross-functional team used in their team if they've been siloed off for a while. And if you don't make those transparent, then you can create a variety of misalignments across the team. So a couple of key strategies here to start off with. Always, always, always essential to spend some time with the team really anchoring in your common purpose so that you know there's alignment with that group on where we're going, why it's important to go there, and even starting to think about some steps we might take. Because if you've got that alignment, that can help to bring any of those pieces or stray areas of the team or practices back in alignment. The other thing is really to make clear what common agreements you're going to have around communication, around time setting, around task management, because again, you've got people who are working from different areas of the organization that may have their own, and oftentimes have their own, practices around these that have been established and are habit and routine that for this new team won't be apparent, won't be a part of the routine. And so you really want to make sure you're talking about those pieces and coming to a new agreement as a group as to how you're going to handle all those things.
Another important thing to consider is that when we talk about cross-functional teams, sometimes these teams are temporary, project-based. We might be pulling folks from different departments together to create this team that's focused on this project or initiative. So it's really important to make sure that the purpose of that team is clarified not only to the members of the team, but to the organizations that those members are borrowed from. But who are these people reporting to, and are they clear and all aligned on the purpose of this initiative and how it's happening? And also, furthermore, is it aligning up the chain of leadership? Ultimately, is this a company priority? Is this purpose something that has been identified as a clear strategy for the organization? Does it ladder into our business goals? If we're using OKRs or some other framework, are the things that we're doing in this team directly connected to that work? Because if not, then we maybe need to re-steer and make it clear how they do align or ladder up into those things.
Your choice of tools for your cross-functional team are essential for your success. So when it comes down to it, we're oftentimes recommending and using tools around prototyping, also tools around visual collaboration, and then tools and recommendations for communication. So at the top here, prototyping is such a key part of success in your work, being able to rough things out, get them out to people, get feedback. We recommend using the tools that you already use to make things, to make those apps, to mock things up. Use tools that folks are familiar with to rough those pieces out. For visual collaboration, we love tools like Mural and Miro that allow you to actually collectively be in a visual sticky note whiteboard space to put together different ideas, to make meaning, grouping, move things forward, and have a log essentially of the work that you've done. And then finally, thinking about your communication tools here. Certainly using tools that are already in place in the organization that multiple folks across the cross-functional team, regardless of where they come in the organization, are familiar with can be key. But if you haven't selected those yet, then looking at things like Slack, Notion, and communication tools like that allow us to have more asynchronous but at the moment communication with team members.
When it comes to technology tools, we're really wanting to think about things that allow for live collaboration. So collaborative editing, so whether that's Google Docs or Microsoft 365 files, whatever it is that allows people to come in and put live comments and comment to each other and track changes and see things that are evolving rather than just putting attachments on emails that then are fixed versions that are floating around. It's going to really slow down this mechanism of feedback that we talked about, so important for a collaborative culture. So things like Miro as well as Figma, these all have this powerful commenting. You can get straight into the moment to the spot that you're wanting to provide feedback on, rather than sitting a long description or saying, what if we changed XYZ in the coordinate that's over here and 3 by 4 inches off the bottom corner next to the button that says hello. No, you can just put a comment right on the button that says hello. These are very critical elements to tools. To the point Eric made about prototyping with the tools you already use, oftentimes people misconstrue what a prototype is. And what we're really talking about is what's an early draft of the thing. So if you're trying to create a thing that's going to exist in the wild, what's the tool you would ultimately use to make that thing? And can you make an early version of it? So if you're making a slide deck and you use PowerPoint, what's a rough draft of the slide deck? Let's go ahead and map that out. Even if it looks horrendous, share that out and so that you can get comments on it early and build it up collaboratively. You could even have one person work on one side of the slide, the other person working on the other. That's what collaboration's all about. The last thing I'll say on this part is that tools don't have to be technology. So if we can bring in collaborative participation tools, facilitation tools to make for a more collaborative environment. If you aren't thinking about tools like that, have a look at our tools like Take 5 or abstraction laddering or critical uncertainties. Any of these things can be really powerful tools to bring in and enhance collaboration in these groups.
So in this video, we explored the power of cross-functional teams to leverage the diversity of skill sets and backgrounds in your organization for innovation, for efficiency. We outlined different ways to make sure you're setting up the right culture for cross-functional work, and then how to navigate those challenges that can come up when people come from different areas of the organization, haven't worked together before, and you need to figure out ways to align on purpose and make sure you're aligning on the practices that you're going to use in order to be successful. At the end of the day, cross-functional teams and diverse teams continue to outperform homogeneous ones because of that diversity, and if you can leverage that, you're going to see high impact in your work.
We talked about numerous techniques in this video. I encourage you to pick between 1 to 3 things and just go try them immediately, whether it's bringing some facilitation skills into what you do, whether it's thinking about how we take inventory of our culture and how we're encouraging better collaboration across different departments, or it could be to go try out Miro or Figma or do more prototyping. Whatever it is, go put those things into action today, and as those things start to bear fruit, come back to this video and think about other things you might want to adopt.